Welcome to another episode. On the other side, we are about to talk about remediation versus being held back. Are we just passing kids through? Are we failing in our responsibility? That's on the other side. And also, there's a national tragedy happening. We'll talk about it all in the South Star Classroom. Class is in session. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the South Star Classroom. That's David, that's Jubilee, and that's Omar. Omar has promised me that he is not being held captive. He is not locked away somewhere with them beating the hell out of him for information.
Hey, man, just because I'm promised, man, doesn't mean that it ain't so. You know what I'm saying? Like, promise all day long.
Well, look, man, we got a beautiful show led by some beautiful people. Y'all all look very beautiful today. That's not just for Jubilee, because I think men need to hear that too. David, you're a beautiful young man, brother.
You look beautiful, David. You look beautiful.
Omar,
you look beautiful, Charles.
Omar still is like a model, even when he is being held hostage in an undisclosed location and given only a glass of water to survive on for the one day. You know,
that's right, man. It's rainwater too. Ain't nobody gonna tell me what to do.
It's all good. Well, y'all know I don't like to do the check-ins, man. I hate it. So I'm gonna quote to David. I think it's the most silly shit in the world. I hate professional organizations that make you do icebreakers, like especially when you making six figures, like we in kindergarten. Anyway, to get off my line.
It's our show. We can be doing anything you want. Like, why you got to start the show with hate?
Because we be like, what do we got to do to check in? If we don't check in on somebody, Jubilee is gonna stop the show and say we didn't check on these people.
Yes, because you have to have a heart for people. 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures, 9 figures. It doesn't matter. We are all in this journey of life experiencing different things, and you got to know how you're doing.
So instead of doing the work that I'm paying people to do or people paying us to do, I got to ask you, what's your favorite color ice cream? Understood. I got it. Completely understood. That will free the world.
The infamous Charles Dig. Omar, David, I need you to say something to Charles. He's doing it again.
I'm giving it to David. David is
the ice cream?
David is the wise turtle. We are giving to our wise owl, wise turtle. But how you doing, David? Make us better, man.
I will try.
I am a humbug. We're in that season. Somebody give me a humbug.
Yeah, man.
You're
about to win the player hater of the year.
I'm telling you.
I might be the baby of the show, but spiritually, I am 117 years old. I just need people to know that. And my back hurts. Go ahead, David.
Yeah. So things are good. We're obviously calendar-wise I guess we're like in the fall, but the weather here is not cooperating. It's still quite warm, so you kind of you can see like we're heading into like Halloween, Dia de los Muertos, and everything else that happens after that. But it's still like we're gonna hit like 90, I think, tomorrow or something. So
why do we pass it to David? You see the subtle. The humble brags. I mean, Omar's probably in great weather too. Omar, what's the weather where you are?
Yeah,
man. I'm in Los Angeles, man. It's like 78 right now.
That's really nice.
80 degrees. Yeah, man. It's nice. It's nice.
Man. Yeah. Obviously, like we have our topic today, which I look forward to getting into. It's got a lot to say on grade retention and promotion and all of that. So we'll get there, but also recognize that, we do have an international tragedy that's unfolding. So we'll also be speaking to that, here in a minute. And let's see what else. Anything else? That's pretty much it. So I'm happy to be here. Work has been picking up for me. So I got 2 new clients working on a couple of different regional projects. I'm excited about that. And that's it. We're here.
See, no, it's no check-in. I'm with it. Go ahead, take us in, brother. It's fine. What do we? You want to do a check-in, or we going straight into the global?
No,
incident?
man, you gotta give Jubilee space.
We're checking in. We're checking in.
You gotta give Jubilee space.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah. We're checking in.
She can have a whole screen.
We're human beings.
You know what? If you go in the dictionary and look up the word petty, let me tell y'all something. Y'all gonna find Dr. Charles Cole III. His picture's gonna be right next to the word petty. Okay. Now
hate.
I'm just saying, that was a soft little jab. That wasn't as bad as it could be. You see, Charles be on here saying all sorts of reckless things, and nobody stops him. Okay. Anyway, I'm fine. Hi, I'm fine. I can't believe that it's halfway through October.
Yeah.
Going on to November. I am happy to say that I have a new addition in my family. I have a new nephew that I am excited to have met over the weekend. And that's really my check-in. I've been very sentimental. You probably think I'm always sentimental. Maybe I am. But just really giving God thanks for family and for peace and for the simple things in life. So that's where I am. And I'm happy to be here today. Throwing it to you, Omar.
Yeah, man. So
good job, Omar. We really thought you was going to start talking before you unmuted. We really did. You did good.
I always
caught
thank
yourself.
you so much, man. I'm reading tips on how to do basic podcasting. Usually unmuting yourself before speaking, and even then, man, the tip is like, stop being a dumbass. And I'm like, I can't do it. Look, it's been an interesting ass week. Like, we're going to talk about it on the show. There's a global situation. Everyone's chiming in. We talked about it last week. But like, it's really interesting having like a Lebanese background. I come from a Phoenician background. So like, the Lebanese will say we're Phoenician. That's the ancient ancestry before the Arabs, before the Ottomans, before everybody. And like, look, it was a pervasive culture. All right. We set up shipping. We set up algebra. We like basically invented zero and shit, along with the Mayans, like on two sides of the world. I understand the history of that region, I think, pretty well. Certainly not as well as folks who live out there, but like, I've been just getting all kinds of unsolicited talk this week, having a cognizance of what's going on over there. So it's been interesting. So I ran away. I'm here, held under captivity. Somebody save me. I am at my buddy's house here in Los Angeles, and we're paying him a visit. That I got work up in Seattle. But yeah, man, like, things are good. Like, we're gonna head up to the Hollywood Bowl. I'm gonna go see U2 at the Sphere on Friday.
Ooh,
like, I got things going on. Hey, man, it's that beautiful dog.
Hey, hi, Meadow. It's Charles's favorite person.
Yeah, man. So I'm ready to dive into this shit because we got a lot of stuff to talk about.
Let's do it.
Well, I'm very jealous of David's passive aggressive flex on us about his 90-degree weather. I'm sorry that is terrible for you, but it is a nice brisk 60 degrees here, and you don't have fall. Okay, this is about to be the most beautiful time of year. I will take as many golden pictures as I can where everything is changing at the same time and the leaves are starting to fall.
Yeah.
It's very beautiful. And as a kid, that's how I remember stuff, was through the season. So when I moved to Oakland when I was 9 or 10, I could not remember anything because there are no seasons in the Bay Area. So take that for your 90-degree weather.
Well, yes and no. It depends on where you're coming from, Charles, because when I left San Diego in like 1996 for the Bay Area, part of the reason was we were just looking for, a more metropolitan, cosmopolitan environment, music-wise, food-wise, culture-wise, art-wise, but also realized, like, living in San Diego, like, the weather is so, like, there's so few variations that you don't get those markers for the year. And that's why, like, literally people are just so chill, and all of a sudden it's like, what have you done with your life? Because you've lost track of time because it's always like beautiful weather. And so so we left, and kind of to shake it up. So we got that experience. I mean, even for you, it wasn't, the Bay Area wasn't seasonal, but for us it was.
Well,
and now
listen,
I'm back and I'm like,
we
I can deal with it now. I'm older now, but
we
I
cried
didn't want
well
to like
tears for
waste
you
my
that the
life,
weather was so nice that it was so good that you and your wife was like, we need some more adventure because it's too good here.
Yep.
It has been an interesting week though, nonetheless. You take the good with the bad. There's been some good business stuff happening, some stuff that's annoying me, some good personal stuff, some things that are annoying me and kind of draining. But I am looking forward to today. I'm glad everybody is here. Did everybody check in? I don't know if everybody checked in. To throw it back to you, David. There is some serious stuff that's happening around the world. And David, why don't you cue that up for us so we can have that moment?
Yeah. So we wanted to just take some time to talk about, what's been happening over, I don't know how long it's been, a week, maybe, or longer. And then today, obviously, an escalation in the violence. I won't call it a war, but I will say the violence in the Middle East. I think today with, a hospital that was hit, there's some questions around whose missile it was, but regardless, a hospital was hit, and I think a couple hundred lives were lost, and it's just that the violence is in 2023 to see people that can't come to the table and agree on some basic kind of tenets to keep peace is my opinion, wherever you stand, is shameful, especially when innocent people are literally caught in the crossfire. So we wanted to just take a minute to talk about what's happening with the Israeli Palestinian conflict. It seems like it's going to be going on for a while. And so I just wanted to open it up to any of you. I've got a couple of things to say on it, but I wanted to hear from you. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? What messages, what message do you have, or what questions do you have?
I'll hop in. I mean, it's tragic. I think I've been really quiet about it, just kind of studying and reading up and reading timelines and trying to understand it from a historical perspective in terms of the disagreement or the opposing views. And today I saw a couple of images that I kind of quickly swiped away from because it's so heartbreaking. But today I kind of sat in that space and I'm like, this is genocide. It's genocide. It's sad. And you all said something on the last episode about how do we, build or develop world citizens, so that they can be well informed about stuff like this and hopefully become advocates for innocent people. And we have seen this play out in different ways throughout our history with different groups of people. But I think it's important to understand that it's genocide, it's tragic, and to ignore it or to meadow might bark, but to ignore it or to act like we don't see it, we don't know how to feel about it. I think those are all unfair statements, and that's where I'll end. Those are my initial thoughts.
I'll go just in the sense of I think Owen David should probably have the last word on this for a multitude of reasons. Similar, Jubilee. I mean, this was not something that I fully learned about in school. I didn't know about this conflict. I didn't learn about it till I got to college, basically, and I had friends on either side of this thing, and it's something that runs very, very deeply. And what I think is reminding people, one, there's an interesting dynamic at play. This stuff is playing out now in a social media era, which is very interesting. And people can kind of comment and say whatever, and it's not contained or distilled in a certain type of way. I also think that it is just it's just a reminder about war and conflict is a brutal thing. Because you can see this, I think it's hitting people in different ways. But I think since human beings have been on this rock, and there's been disagreements, war has been a part of it, and it's sifting through. And when you don't know a lot of these things and you're ignorant to it, I'm trying to just be respectful of whatever is happening and just mourning and having my heart go out to everybody that's kind of involved. I try not to have a super strong or hot take on this one way or the other, just because I don't know, and And you know, I was talking, I'm in a black men's book club, and we were kind of briefly debating it, or not debating it, but just talking about it, and just the way it had been talked about. And it's like, man, what would it have been like if we were alive when Nat Turner's raid happened, and what came from that and why that came about, and just having a different perspective there. And I think it's sad. But I have a lot more education that I need to go do personally before I feel comfortable giving like some type of strong, crazy take. So I'll get out the way for David and Omar. And again, Omar, you know, you have blood that is tied into this conflict one way or the other. So I just wanted to be respectful of that and get at the space it deserved.
Sure. Look, I don't want to go off for too long, but I don't know if a lot of folks understand the history of what happened there. And I think there's been a lot of talk online about the history and everything else. And I don't want to go too far into it, but look, you have a extraordinarily volatile piece of land that people have been fighting and contesting for since the beginning of 2 millennia ago. So, you know, in Jesus's time, they were basically trying to rid that area of the Romans. Jesus was essentially a freedom fighter, as was John the Baptist. They were trying to create a land that was peaceful for the Jews where they could escape persecution. And that goes back millennia to Moses's time. You fast forward through the year 0, according to whichever calendar that, you know, you want to subscribe to and so forth. And you go through it into, you got the Romans, you got the Assyrians, you got the Phoenicians, you got the Arab Empire, you got, you know, the Persian Empire extended pretty far. You have the Ottoman Empire that existed for centuries. And when the Ottoman Empire dissolved after World War I, that whole area was extraordinarily volatile. So what is known as Lebanon today was the Ottoman Empire, was then a French protectorate after the Ottoman Empire fell. For those of y'all that don't know, Israel and Lebanon didn't really become countries until after World War II. So for those of y'all that like Israel, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, like those borders were essentially created mostly through the intervention of the UN and European forces in the 1940s. So when we're sitting here talking about these places, the most important thing to understand is that like these countries were newly established with a deep level of Western influence. Now, Israel will claim like a Zionist situation, like, hey, this was our land. We were here. This was the promised land. This was the land promised to us by God, Moses, Jesus, on and on and on. And then ultimately they left. And then who occupied that land? The Palestinians and the Arabs did for millennia, like multiple millennia. The Palestinians and the Arabs were there. What's going on now that needs to kind of be divided is that there's a huge fight about we're supporting Israel and this is this, that, and the other. And like, look, I think death, genocide, and murder is never appropriate. And anyone sitting here on the internet talking one way or the other that murder is justified, you're getting into like weird crusader type shit that I think is extraordinarily inappropriate. Like to justify murder, to justify homicide, to justify kids getting killed, I think is deplorable. And I think most people would agree with that. What I don't understand is people deciding to like jump in and all of a sudden being like, this is who we are and this is what we believe in, without understanding the inordinate complexity of this situation, and then making the divide between the Palestinians, Hamas, Israel, and Hezbollah, and understanding the complexity of those 4 different levels of arrangements, right? Who believes what? This is an attack from Hamas. Hamas, yes, is a group of people, some would easily call terrorists, who are subscribing to the ideology that like, hey, we were here. These Israelis came in the 1940s and said, this is ours now, and we want our land back. The Palestinians are basically dealing with a situation that they've been dealing with since the 1940s, where essentially they were like, okay, look, we were here. We're not very cool with a 2-party the two-state solution, because ultimately, while that was offered, it's weird because it's like you came into the land that we've been here for millennia, and now that you're wanting this country, what are we supposed to do about it? The Israelis have a lot of justification in saying that, like, look, like the Holocaust is real and we've been persecuted all around the world. This was supposed to be the promised place of peace. So you've got an inordinately complex situation that people are just beginning to like immediately jump into sides. And I'm like, before jumping into sides, man, like I said in the last episode, let's respect the complexity of this situation and unpack it, because there's a lot of stuff that people don't know about. And it's also like easy, because while I am deeply empathetic for what's going on with Israel, I'm deeply empathetic for the fact that I don't believe that genocide in any way, shape, or form is okay. But like people coming out here and being like, dude, F those Arabs. And I'm like, you mean me? You mean like my people? You mean the people that like have occupied Lebanon and that area for 2,000 years? Like, take it easy before you start, claiming jihad on me, dude, and everyone else. Because taking sides doesn't allow you to be open-minded about the complexity of the situation. And I'm still like wrapping my head around the like 5,000 years of complexity that has been in the turmoil of that area. And I want to pitch it to David, but again, I got to say, it's not to say that like anyone is celebrating Hamas's actions, and anyone who is, like, that's fucked up. And sorry, man, like if you're celebrating hate and genocide and some kind of weird ideology that you have no historical context for, like check that shit at the door. No one needs that right now. And you're just perpetuating hate and misinformation. David, man, that's my hot take.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think what I have to offer is similar to what I offered last week when we talked about it. My orientation goes towards the young people, right? And so, talking to your children, number one, in the home. I mean, this is something that like everybody has seen in some way, shape, or form, right? And it can be very confusing for young people. So I think as a parent and as parents, it's important to open a dialogue with your children. You don't have to give them any answers, but you can ask them what they are seeing. What do they feel about it? What do they think about it? And help them to kind of make sense of what's happening. As Omar said, it's deeply complex. Everyone has, either their own justified kind of orientation towards what's happening there. I know I do. But also, this is happening in the time of like social media, and it's just wild. It's like people are just throwing stones from either side, literally. So I think, talk to your children about it. You have to, you can't shy away from that. And then also like in schools, schools should be, this thing is not going to go away. Even if it ends next week, it still happened. I think it's really important that, schools and school leaders and school systems are preparing teachers to have these conversations and not shy away from them. Again, not bringing personal politics into the classroom, but opening space for young people to have a dialogue about what they're seeing, and to talk it out. So I encourage people to do that. I don't think it's happened in my kids' school. I think they tend to just kind of like, oh, it's not happening. I'm like, it's not happening. There's a large Persian demographic at my kids' school. It's probably over 30, 40%. Like, you can't ignore this, right? And so, yeah, I think that's my take on it, making sure that that we're actually talking about it like we are on the show.
Yeah, well, glad we could get, just be able to touch on it. I know however brief it was, praying for everybody that's involved there. It's very, very sad, man. Jubilee, today is your day. This is you and your show. So we're going to throw it to you.
Let's do it.
Go.
All right, so we are shifting gears, and we are talking about the power of grade level retention. Is it myth or is it a method? And so some facts, some stats to start us off. So overall retention has decreased in the past few decades from 2000 to 2016, the percentage of students held back in a grade decreased from 3.1% to 1.9%. But still, there are disparities between student groups. And as you know, those student groups are Black and brown children. As of 2016, 2.6% of Black K through 8 students were retained compared to 1.5% of white students and Hispanic students. And these stats are according to the National Center for Education for Statistics. In some cases, the consequences of retention affect students of color more than their white peers. One recent study found that being held back in elementary grades increases the odds of dropping out of high school. And that these effects were strongest for Black and Latino girls. And so, I'm throwing it out to you. What are your initial responses to the stats I just shared? And then I'll follow up with some other questions.
I'll go first. I mean, that's very interesting. Thank you for breaking that down. It's deeply troubling, right? I mean, to have to repeat a year of school, there are like social consequences, towards that. But I think for me, the big thing is like, if I'm a student in the 4th grade or the 6th grade or whatever it is, and I'm unsuccessful, putting me through that same experience again for another year without changing any of the teaching methods and or supports with the same teachers is like the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome.
That's it.
So, like retention in some cases, it's got to be thoughtful. And, it's unfair to children to just say, you need to do another year of what you just did that you weren't successful in, and we're not going to change anything on our end. Right? That's wild.
I agree with that. What do you think, Omar?
So there's statistic after statistic for any educator that understands that like retention, the majority of the time actually has regressive, regressive effects, meaning the child then feels both dumb, humiliated, because like you think about it, like you're in a school, everyone knows you, you're like the 8th grader, you're the 10th grader, you're the 11th grader, and people's identities are tied to these classes, unfortunately. And look, just because I don't agree with the way that the American educational system is set up, clearly I don't, because like we created a totally different system, doesn't mean that I get to then say that kids are going to be the exception to the rule, when ultimately when a kid is held back, everyone's going to know. And it's not just embarrassing, it is extraordinarily regressive on their self-esteem, on their understanding. But David makes such a legitimately good point, which is like, where were the supports to begin with? And then in holding the child back, how do you believe that those supports or anything else is going to be done to make a difference? By holding the child back, you're not creating a solution. It is the most like quick fix shit of all time. Now, if you have done all of the interventions, I mean, all the interventions, right? Like you were there, they've got a IEP, like an individualized education plan, even if they're not in special education, or what's called a 504, which is essentially extra support for needs like dyslexia, speech therapy, so on and so forth. Like, let's say you gave all the supports and the child is still in need of deep level of recovery. Like, does retention work? I mean, maybe at a different school, maybe with different systems, maybe if you've done everything. But like, my philosophy is, if you haven't exhausted every single intervention and every single support, like, what are you doing? But I think Americans are so quick, and people are so quick to be like, dude, retain that kid. Like, you didn't pass, retain that kid. There's got to be consequences. And it's like, okay, cool. So you make that the consequence, and then you look at the statistic of kids that are retained, and the dropout rates are like, what, over 80%?
It's crazy.
Like last I checked, on a national basis. So it's like, what are we really trying to solve here by doing this? Are you solving a situation for that kid? Or are you solving a situation to demonstrate to every other kid, hey, this is what's going to happen to you if you don't like get your act straight? Like, what is it really? You know?
Yeah, I think I have a different little take. I mean, I actually agree with everything that was said, but I think the numbers that Jubilee pointed out is that they're not holding back a lot of people. Like that number is going down. Like we're passing people on, and we not able. And what's Black reading assessment data at this point? What's Brown reading the assessment data at this point? Like there's a lot of both ands happening. But I'll answer with a story. When I went to go live with my grandmama and we all lived in the projects, we would have these row sessions, you know, playing the dozens or whatever, cap sessions, depending on what part of the world you live in. And maybe I didn't have the flyest kicks on, so they like at your shoes or, you know, something about your mama or whatever the case is. But here's the thing. We was all living in the projects. All our parents was on drugs. Like the point that I'm making that might not connect for a lot of other people is there's a sense of splitting hairs when we're talking about schools where it might be, you know, it's embarrassing to be held back. It's embarrassing to be the big fifth grader. And I think this is more of I think in this way, it's a little bit more of an elementary thing. And what I mean by elementary school thing is because it's like one class for the whole grade. Once you got middle school and high school, like, you know, you could have a myriad of classes. You could still be called a 10th grader, but you taking 9th grade English or whatever the case is, right? But I think that when we start looking at the whole school, the whole vessel and the whole thing is struggling and suffering, and whether it's struggling because education failed it and society failed it or they failed it or whatever the case is, the simple bottom line is that is being failed. And I think we have to start having a conversation is, how is it that we have so many kids in the 10th grade that's in English class and they can't read and comprehend or at a 5th or 6th grade level? How is it that we are trying to do basic math and make sure people understand their numbers and how to count and how that applies to life, you know, but everybody is so far behind. Like, we're having conversations about young people feeling embarrassed, but what's more embarrassing? Like not being able to take care of yourself as an adult, regardless whether it's society or not. So I'm not saying you should just start failing kids. I'm not saying that at all. I do think it's 2023, about to be 2024. I think that technology has shifted. I think there is a way for if we worried about this social piece for young people, you know, there has to be more firm things in place to actually make sure that we're teaching the things that we promised to teach. And listen, everybody don't got to have a 4.0 or have super mastery or whatever the case is. As Dr. Fuller said, I saw him a few weeks ago and he was giving a talk and he said, listen, somebody told him there's a lot of people that can pass the test but fail at life. And there's a lot of people that might fail that test and pass that life. So I'm not saying that your whole worth is built up into school or how well you do. But if the purpose of school or the purpose of education is to build a population that is aware, that is critical thinkers, and we just talked about as a global citizenry issue that most of Americans, if you are not from either of those tribes, that many, many, many people are ignorant to, like, you know, like maybe there should have been more of us held back in world history, or world history should have been tweaked and rebuilt to make sure that it's relevant and that we're actually passing that on. So I don't disagree with what Omar or Jube or anybody has said about, you know, there's a stigma that is tied to it. But we all playing the dozens and capping on each other's parents. And we all going home to a drug-addled, you know, I grew up in the 80s, man, like in the 90s with a crack epidemic. Everybody I knew was impacted by the crack epidemic. So it's like calling my mama a crackhead when they do crack, she do crack with your mama. Like, it's you know what I'm saying? So me talking about and splitting hairs of this class inside of this school, where the total population, only less than 10% are proficient at reading, is the biggest irony. And until we want to be adults and deal with the nuanced conversation that is there and that needs to happen, where it's not just simple as this the bad guy, this the good guy, but actually is everybody's taking the blame because it's blood on everybody's hand and society's, but society don't have a name. And we're not really thinking about solutions and ways to get better, then we're going to keep putting up this charade and pandering to people to make them feel good, but they can't take care of themselves.
So that's the flip side of the coin. What you're talking about, Charles, is like what's known as like social promotion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like moving young people through grades when they are not actually prepared for the next grade, but you still move them because like you don't want to have a 20-year-old 12th grader, right? And what are the consequences of that, which I agree are equally harmful. One quick thing on like, and this goes back to our big picture show that we did a couple of weeks ago of thinking about how schooling has or hasn't changed coming out of the pandemic. And we know that there are ways to run and organize schools that don't rest solely on a grade level grid, right? It's like more like competency, proficiency based, systems where students move according to what they are demonstrating that they've learned, right? As opposed to being like, you're not ready for the 4th grade. Well, why, right? What are the skills that I need to like master, right? And so, I mean, there are models out there. One of the schools where I spent 3 years at a Montessori charter school in Oakland, and it was fascinating because it's not quite the exact grade levels or ages as true Montessori, but our kindergartners were with TKs, and then our 1st, 2nd, and 3rd graders were in lower elementary. Our 4th, 5th, and 6th graders were in upper elementary, and then we had a middle program too. So we had grade levels, but I could be a 1st grader in a class with 3rd graders, and what that did is that gave us a lot of leeway to identify like maybe I wasn't quite ready for the 2nd grade because of a reading issue, but we had time and we could plan around it so that by the time I got to 3rd grade, I was ready for promotion to the upper elementary program. And so, that's an old system, right? That's like over 100 years old. So, I mean, there's got to be a way that we can figure this out where we can address both the issue of retention, but also on the other end, the issue of social promotion. So,
So I'd like to throw out another stat, right? So there's a couple of studies from Florida, one of our favorite states. They have a 3rd grade.
I love Florida.
All right. They've got a retention policy that they've had in place since 2003. And it's basically the students who don't pass the 3rd grade reading exam can be retained. And if they are, though, the state requires schools to develop reading support plans for them and to place those students with an effective teacher. Right. So with that, my next question is it fair for mandatory statewide retention policies? Matter of fact, no, I want to go to this question. What role does teacher accountability play in a child's potential retention? And how can schools address this responsibility?
It's a good ass question, man. I don't know. Like, I have a different bit of a philosophy, and then I want to get down to answering the question, which is in our middle schools, and remember, like EPLA starts in middle school. We don't have elementary. So I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on the elementary school track. But at least in middle school, what we do is essentially say the literacy level of this child and the growth of this child is the responsibility of not just the reading teacher, of the entirety of the team. So much so that the incentive structure, like the literal pay incentive, is divided by the entirety of the team. So the way we set it up is that, like, sure, the reading teacher may be the teacher of record and demonstrates growth of literacy, and they may get like a pretty decent chunk of the money. And I don't mean like the majority chunk, I mean like a decent chunk, but the overwhelming majority of that money is separated between all the teachers because it becomes the group of teachers, it becomes a responsible party. That is a possible situation. David's child goes to a large middle school, but they have like small learning communities. I taught in a large middle school that had small learning communities, and the 4 teachers, like our 4 teachers of records, we shared the exact same group of like 150 kids, and we had a responsibility to those kids, and we could track the data. So the system itself becomes one way to solve this situation and create an accountability, because then it becomes really tough for it to be like, okay, English teacher, like you are the end all be all. You're the only one who's going to be responsible for this child's reading. And social studies teacher, you get to watch Gettysburg every single day. And art teacher, don't even worry about it. And PE teacher, just go out there and do dodgeball. Like, we have reading and writing and literacy in our PE program on purpose, because I think it's a lot to say to one teacher, you're responsible for every single kid, as opposed to a group of people that then become responsible themselves in an organized manner. I think that has a lot to do with leadership. Now, I will say this, the really great teachers, and without being super aggrandized about it, my 7th grade team, along with another team led by, you know, a friend of mine, she was exceptional. She worked with the ESL kids. Like, these two teams, we got the toughest kids because we were exceptional teachers. And then what happens? So, like, the exceptional teachers, it's like, hey, these kids are really, really, really difficult, so they're going to go with you. Great. I love them. I was happy to have them. We made inordinate gains for all those kids. It becomes a political issue amongst adults to be like, listen, I'm happy for all those kids, but then, like, why are these teachers even here? So they got to just kick back, not do shit, be like teachers that suck, and then they get easy kids, so their scores look awesome, and they're pulling a quarter of the weight. So I don't want to make this about adults, because this is truly about what the child needs. But you've got a problem with politics, you got a problem with the leadership, you got a problem with structure. And how do those things correlate to assessing and helping a child? Because we can't just sit here and throw the blame all on one teacher, man. It just sucks. I'd hate to be that teacher and be like, hey, man, eat shit.
You know, I don't know. Like, I just and I hear what you're saying. You all were saying something earlier that made me think about as David talked about just the importance of intervention. And then what came to mind for me was, you know what, sometimes we don't realize the importance of just solid tier 1 instruction, right? Like, even if you are not the world's greatest teacher, you know what I mean?
Oh,
like,
also, Jubilee, for our amazing audience, what is solid tier 1 instruction?
Teaching to the middle. Just know how to do a solid lesson plan and teach to the middle, so that somewhere between 85 to 90% of your students that are sitting in front of you will understand and develop mastery around whatever that standard is, just because it's a good lesson. Maybe it does not have bells and whistles, right? It doesn't have all the things a perfect lesson would have, but it's strong enough so that those babies that are in your class that came in, right, on grade level, I'm not talking about remediation or acceleration or differentiation, just a solid lesson, right? After the solid lesson, right, is not effective for whatever reason, then we talk about intervention, right? But it just makes me think about, you know, how important just tier 1 instruction is. And if we're talking about teachers and their accountability, at the very least, it would be wonderful, you know, for teachers to do that. And I also think, like, when we think about other professions, and some people may think this is comparing apples and oranges, but no other profession do we go like, you need a community to help. Like, you go to the doctor and you know, you're having an issue with your wrist, right? You go to the doctor who specializes in that, right? We are not looking for like, well, who's the community representative and who else is going to help, you know, give me this diagnosis. We expect the doctor to know what they're talking about, to be able to give a diagnosis, to be able to prescribe whatever medication is going to help to reduce the pain, right? We expect that if we are, you know, if we have to do PT, that physical therapist will know whatever exercise we're going to have to do to get our wrist back to 100%. So on that teacher accountability side, I have very strong views around that, around, can you just do a solid good lesson, right? And like, do you know your stuff? Do you know your content? Do you know your standards for those children? And I just feel like that's just the way it should be if you are a teacher getting a paycheck.
Yeah.
Other thoughts?
Go ahead, David. I saw you was about to go.
Yeah, I want to talk about this Florida thing. Maybe it's the way it's written, but I've got some issues with this Florida experiment. So I think number one, it's really about timing. And so this, again, to repeat, this Florida policy is emblematic of like when the only tool that you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. This says that, you know, third grade, when students are into third grade, if they don't pass a particular exam, they get held back, right? And they also have some kind of a guarantee to be with an effective teacher. They've already been in school for 4 years, right? Kindergarten, first, second, third, and all of a sudden, like we're gonna do a dipstick test. We're gonna check the oil, and like you either pass or you don't pass. And so my thing here is around timing. When again, I'm going back to my experience as a school leader in an elementary school, TK8 school. I will tell you, I mean, what we did was we started with early intervention in kindergarten, right? We didn't expect all kindergartners and first graders or second graders to be, you know, proficient readers. But we had early warning systems. We had diagnostics. You know, we talked about individuals. My own son in kindergarten, I remember in February of his kindergarten year, you know, some of the data that they were getting back on him was identifying that, you know, he could use some support around like sight words or whatever it was, right? Getting into the specifics of literacy. His grade level team identified what his needs were and got him into a 5-week small group reading intervention at the school. And it worked, right? And by the time he was finished with kindergarten, he was like reading on the screen, you know, and it was unbelievable. But we started early. You don't wait until the third grade to like start to talk about interventions. And so it needs to start much earlier. And this is that critical time of the year too. A lot of the clients I'm working with right now, we're focused on like diagnostic data, you know, figuring out intervention plans and support plans for students or school-wide, like tier 1. So when I see this policy, the thing that they're doing in Florida, I get what they're trying to address, but it feels very like what did you do for the last 4 years, right? And now at the very end of the stage, you're going to hold a student back, you know, when you probably don't have a track record of any kind of like effective intervention. And I feel like that's a bad policy.
Yeah, man, listen, I think, well, one, in regard to Florida, I would just say, there's any nice little condos in South Beach, not necessarily all of Miami, but the South Beach area, I would gladly take it. And y'all will not have to hear from me except for the hurricane months. But I would also just say, just as we had this conversation, I think it's interesting. I mean, I think that there are places that have these high stakes. I think I agree with what you were saying. Remember in Oakland when we had the exit exam? But the exit exam, for those that don't know, was a general test that you had to take to get out of high school. Like you could graduate, but you wouldn't graduate with a diploma. You would graduate with a certificate. And the premise was it was supposed to be 9th grade or maybe 10th grade, but very early.
It was given in the 10th grade, but it was like a 7th or 8th grade content test.
Okay, so the content is 7th, 8th grade reading comprehension and things like that. And we performed so poorly that they eventually got rid of it. Jamaica has the GSATs. Are y'all familiar with the GSATs? It's the grade 6 achievement test. I know about this because my accountant is Jamaican and her daughter was in the 5th grade, about to go to the 6th, and she wanted to move them back to Jamaica so her daughter could take this test, because however well you do on this test can have implications moving on. And she felt that her daughter should be able to perform well on this test. I guess I'm saying to say, it's like, look, man, I'm never going to be the cat that case for Florida. I haven't had a chance to read it. I'm sure there's something deep and racist in there somewhere. I don't know. I just would blindly bet money on it. And at some point, though, right, it's like, yo, like, you know, people were really upset about that exit exam, but it's like, yo, it's supposed to be 7th grade, like reading skills, and so what David is saying, I didn't hear it as they're going to start necessarily interventions at 3rd grade. I'm hearing it as we can't hold you people accountable in any other way. So you should be doing these interventions in kindergarten and 1st and 2nd grade. You should be making sure these things are happening, and hopefully we will see a decrease year over year of kids that can't pass it because you don't want the state to be the people that's coming in to deal with this. David, I'm gonna keep referencing our old work or my old work. I worked in a district where the state took over and the state implemented minimal things that the district needed to do, the FICMAT, and you would have thought that the FICMAT was Nazi terrorists, but it's like, no, this is basic. Like, if your budget is $100 million, you just can't keep spending $150 million. Like, you get under that for 5 years or however many years consistently, and I would be happy to leave. But Oakland would never do it, right? They needed somebody kind of to hover over them. So to answer your question, Jubilee, like about the teacher or the kid or whatever the case is, you know, you actually gave a good example of the hospital. The hospital, your family doctor would be the equivalent of the tier 1 quality teaching. It is, I'm your family doctor. I'm going to check your vitals. I was on a hospital board for like 6 years. So I deal with this, right? But their job is like, oh, you have something. Hey, David, we took your blood pressure. This is some different stuff. You're going to go see this specialist. And I'm going to monitor and maintain here and figure this out. Like we keep, do we want to professionalize the teaching profession or not? Like, do we want them to be professionals? Like, because a professional medical doctor has what? Malpractice insurance. A professional like lawyer who like goes into court and you have to pass a bar and you could be disbarred, right? Like, and I think that our teachers should be of that high estate and that standard and the patient match. But with that would come like these factors that are making sure that things are happening. And the only reason I always support teachers and I love teachers, but if you take credit for the kids that do good in your class, but every kid that fails, it's the system. I just don't trust you. I'm just not a trusting person in that. And I am somebody who has had majority Black teachers that look like me, that come from my community. I've had white teachers. I've had all these different type of teachers. The vast majority of them were not good teachers. And I'm not saying that as a spiteful kid. I'm saying that now as somebody who is trained, supported, and been in hundreds of schools at this point and was like, oh, that was academic malpractice was happening every single day. So in a place that's lawless, in a place that has no intervention, in a place that has no standard, no bar, and we're going to put a bar, but the bar is so low, like, you know, it's like we're saying, you got to wear, we want you to be a Armani suit level. Our only check is to make sure that you got shoes and socks on, and you like, I can't do that. That's unfair. I just don't know where you go there. So we can keep this as an entry-level position where 40% of teachers can fall into the profession and stumble and say, I want a career in education, or we could change the context of the profession where people are aspiring to be master educators, where they are doing what Omar's team is doing, where they like, I want the worst, give me the worst. If you say that's it, then give them to me. That's what I want, and watch what I do with them. And if I don't, I'm gonna have somebody here that's gonna so it's kind of a chicken or egg thing. And I'm not trying to sound anti-teacher, but if we're going to start talking pro-us, pro-kid, pro-society, and pro-poor people, pro-Black and brown people, the standard has to be raised somewhere. Who's going to shoot the first bullet? Because right now it's a standoff and everybody pointing at each other. And the only person catching bullets is kids. The only people catching bullets is society. The only people catching bullets is, you can look on Twitter and see what the pulse of this country is. And politicians are making decisions off of their Twitter threads at this point. So you ask yourself where you want this country to go and what do you want to see? And I know Black people, poor people, brown people, whatever disparaging thing you want to put on there, we are capable of learning, damn it. We are capable. And I think I was smarter because my situation was so dire and because I needed that to get somewhere. I'm not a conservative. I'm not a liberal. I think at this point, though, we have to introduce common sense conversations back instead of having to bang blood or Crip, because I'm telling you, all we leaving is a bunch of dead people in our wake.
Thank you. David, did you have something you want to add?
Yeah. I think what Charles is talking about,
David, my bad. I hope Jubilee, I hope I didn't go too off, but I was.
I mean, you go off, but that's what Charles does. It's good. It's good.
I just want to be on topic.
It's good. You on topic.
I think what he's talking about is like accountability in the system and like, what does it look like? And And so I will share one quick story. It's a fascinating story. And it's obviously only one school, but you can imagine what this looks like in large school districts, right? Going back to my Montessori experience. So Montessori has a 3 to 3.5 hour, what's called an uninterrupted work period. It's the first part of the day. It's a big, huge learning block, right? Where students have a tremendous amount of independence. They are able to choose where they work, how they work, and what they work on. There's some accountability in the form of a work plan. Teacher is able to do small group instruction and individualized lessons during that time. It's an amazing concept. And so when I first started at the school had been open for 2 years. And so I arrived year 3 and I'm doing observations. And I walk into an elementary classroom, grades 1, 2, 3. I see a 3rd grade boy, an African-American boy, rolling around on the carpet during the work period. I said, what is he doing right now? And he's like, oh, he's taking a body break. Okay. I come back like 10 minutes later. He's still doing it. I'm like, and the teacher said something about, I'm thinking, do I have any data on this child? I want to know where his reading levels are, where his math levels are. And the teacher said that, when the child, this is pure Montessori, when the child is ready, the child will pick up a book. And I'm like, this is a Black boy, and he's in the 3rd grade, and he needs to pick up a book. And we need to figure out how to we need to figure this out. This is not just going to magically happen. And so we instituted some systems so that we were actually moving from pure choice to okay, we're going to start holding students accountable so that they don't get to the 3rd grade and they haven't been engaged in work for the first 4 years of their schooling, right? It's crazy. And so I think I received a lot of pushback on that. I think when you start to talk about accountability and the R word, rigor, into school systems, you also get pushback. People don't like it. But I think then the end result is we end up with these ineffective retention policies on the front end, and then ineffective social promotion, not policies but unofficial practices on the back end. Mm-hmm. And I think they all hurt children. I believe in holding children accountable for what happens in school, but that accountability starts with the adults. And that's not an anti-teacher statement. I'm actually speaking to what Charles was saying earlier is we have to professionalize. We need to keep moving the what happens in schools, the work of teaching, into a much more professional and specialized space.
You said it so much better than me. Thank you, David. David speaks for me. The beard of knowledge / wisdom. I can never remember which one.
It's both, and we're gonna keep adding names for David.
I'm gonna make him a sweater. I'm gonna make him a sweater, and it's gonna be official swag. It's gonna say the beard of knowledge and or wisdom. Yep. There you go.
And that could be my closing, and that could be my closing thought. So
Alonzo's the one that coined it, man, and he's on the comments today. So it's his phrase, and it's the beard of knowledge, man. That's what it is.
Okay. Beard of knowledge. Omar, what were you thinking of over there?
So, look, I boil this down to the fact that I understand where states are at, where educators are at. And what I think the constant conversation, sadly, that boils down for adults becomes one of money. And my final thought is, if we're going to be focusing on the students who need the greatest support, what is the diagnostic support and the teacher support that we are going to put into either these communities or these schools where that is the situation? Because it has long been the hard-fought battle of upper middle class parents basically saying these are our tax dollars, these are our resources, they should go for our kids. And I will once again, like a broken record, reiterate that what people don't understand is that kids, even in kindergarten, come in with a ludicrously dispersed range of reading and language ability. And I always talk about my goddaughter, my niece Alea, whose both parents are are lawyers. Both of them are Stanford graduates. She is currently in the 7th grade and reading at the college level because at kindergarten, she had a vocabulary that was hundreds of thousands of words more than most low-income kids, and had an understanding of words hundreds of thousands more than most low-income kids, because she's surrounded by a group of people who are highly educated, and kids absorb that stuff. So for our low-income kiddos, what are we doing to get those teachers, those schools, the most resources? Because oftentimes it's the low-income schools that are given the least resources. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about, this is my perspective, because I don't want to repeat what David said or what Doc said or what you said, because I think the three of you brought in extraordinarily valid points about support, accountability, getting down to the nitty-gritty of these tests and what we're trying to do with them, and ultimately the responsibility of, I think, a culture in generating a more supportive culture of teaching and the profession of teaching, right? As a superintendent, I think what we need to do is support the flow of resources and necessities to those that need. And that is easier said than done. I have not seen it happen in the districts very often. But if you want to start solving the situation, that's what we need to do. And oftentimes it's not done. So look, man, like, I got a lot of faith in my fellow educators that this is just one of those things where I was like, okay, cool. You're not going to do the right thing. Once again, like, fuck you. I'm going to make my own school district and do the right thing to show what should be done, and that it can be done. But these are the extreme measures that we're taking that I don't think need to be extreme. And I certainly think that any superintendent with their right place, their right ethics, their right mind can make significant differences if they just had the right ethics and did not cower to parents, and especially those of middle and upper middle class status who are griping about every penny when their children are doing exceptionally fine and will do exceptionally fine.
Yeah.
My last thought.
I'll go, and then Jube can close us out. I think one, great conversation. I mean, we always start to get into it. I see why podcasts have been going 2.5 and 3 hours and stuff now. Mm-hmm. It takes a while. It's like a locomotive to get going, and then once you're going, you start, But I think as we get into the nitty gritty of this, man, and I also did want to make sure we acknowledge Toya and Alonzo for their comments, and I wanted to respond to some of Alonzo's comments, but it just didn't work out time wise. But thank you for those. But I would say this: we if we talk about accountability and we start to ask for it, can't necessarily get squeamish when people start to put in things in place that actually makes you accountable. I hear people misquote, and I'm not the savior, or like, I don't cape for No Child Left Behind, but I hear people talk about it all the time with like no facts. Like, I hear people like just say blatant things that were wrong about it, or like how it did this felon thing, but there was actually some growth there when you start to track these things and keep them there, right? I just think that when I say we're on our own, this is what I'm talking about, man. Like it's like, yo, we having an argument, like we arguing about should kids graduate with a diploma if they can't do 7th grade English? Like, is that what we really having we're not having an argument about, yo, so many kids can't do 7th grade English and we've passed all these people. Let's actually fix our practice. Like, we'll linchpin onto like how people feel about it. And it's like, yo, man, like, I just think it's crazy. Like, I just think it's wild. And again, what does professionalizing this stuff look like? What does it look like to be adults? Let's look, some of y'all have farming backgrounds. I'm sure there's a farming background in all of our, if you go back deep enough, because you had to till the land and stuff like that. But in the days when people was having 9, 10, 11 kids because you needed farm hands, and that father or that mother was teaching those kids, this is how you take care of this farm. Like it wasn't like a social promotion thing, yo. It's like, yo, man, I need you to know what you're doing or we won't eat. Like, we won't survive. And we don't have that sense of urgency around survival and education the way that I think that it should be happening for people to take it as seriously as possible. Like, if it's like, yo, hey, Jubilee is a mother. If she's teaching her kids how to make some food and one of them keep leaving the gas on the stove, it's like, hey, man, you got to use the fucking microwave until you learn how to turn off the stove. I don't, you're going to blow us up. When you love somebody, when you love something, when you really truly care about that, you want to make sure they're good at it, man. Not just a pat on the head or whatever the case is. Because what that tells me is that you're okay with me failing in life. You're okay with you feeling good in this moment today. Because as a teacher, I don't think that you should go to schools and teach for your self-esteem. I think you should be doing it because it's your profession. So, you know, I think that I've met a lot of adults that are more concerned with kids liking them than them actually doing their job. And that's why some of my best coaches, some of my best teachers in life have been some of the meanest fuckers I've ever known. But I was prepared. Like, I was able, you know, listen, man, growing up in them shelters, living the way I live, like watching people die, things like that. I'm not saying that there wasn't room for compassion, but there were a few people on that journey that knew what the mission was. That was like, yo, this is what you're about to go into. And I just, what arguments are we having right now? Are we talking about third grade level reading? Are we talking about kids in the third grade that can't do first or kindergarten level, like comprehension? Like, these are our babies. This is the people that's supposed to take care of us later on in life. And if somebody got to take care, if David his son got to take care of him and his wife that he loves later on in life, I promise you, David is going super hard. I promise you, when David goes to that school, he's talking to that teacher like, push my child, please. Do it respectfully. Don't do nothing stupid, but also don't give my kid package that's 3 grades below him. Like, what the That's my final thought, man.
There you have it, Charles's final.
I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. Sorry.
Listen, oh my goodness.
It's okay. You can't do 6th grade English. It's fine. And I call myself a teacher.
Oh man. So here are my final thoughts, right? I've been in a principal seat, right? And I've had to hold students back. And I've also had to socially promote. And it's not a nice decision to have to make either way. When I was in AP, we had a 15-year-old in the 5th grade because he had been held over 3 times because of a poor teacher and poor school systems, et cetera, right? So this is something that really gets me. That's why I understand your sentiment, Charles, because we don't have another choice, but we, pretend that there is another choice, right? My son currently doesn't have a good math teacher. She comes in, she writes something on the board, she sits down, she gives them worksheets, right? Do you understand it? Proportionality and ratio. No, I don't get it, right? I'm not going to let him fail, but I know better, right? So I'm going to support him. I'm going to ask his brother to help him. I'm going to go on Khan Academy or whatever. But that's because I know better. We have parents out there who maybe they even could know better, but they don't have the space and time to be the person who provides remediation or that intervention. How is that fair? So when we're talking about adding this level of professionalism and this level of accountability, I think it's a really important conversation for us to have. And we need to behave as if we understand that our babies do not have a second chance or another choice. Around my son, I said, okay, can you move his class? Nope, that class, they're a year ahead. What about this section? Nope, they're too far behind. So he's got to stay in this class, right? And so it's a very, we need to take it more seriously. And then in terms of when these decisions do have to be made, I do recommend that it's a collaborative decision. If a child does need to be held over, it's not, based off of any kind of stereotype or a threat, which we know historically has existed. You're going to get left back, because I don't like you, because you can't sit still, because you're Black, because you're poor, because you're brown, whatever the case may be. And it really needs to be data-based. It needs to be a collaborative decision between the parents and the school. The best conversations that I have had, like I said, none of them were easy, when the parent was on board and understood the need for it, because they became a supporter of the process, and they became an ally, and they were supportive in 1,000 ways that made the difference for the child. And at the end of the day, if you are in one of these seats, that really should be your focus. Like Charles said, you have folks that understood the mission. Yeah, the mission is to make sure that child has a great end. that child has a great education, and that should be the focus, right? What do I think about, teachers? They need more money. They need to be paid more. Education needs more funding. And I don't believe any of the lies that say the money doesn't exist. I know we talked about this before, Charles. I'm not buying it.
We're paying more per child than we've ever have in the history of
I
the
still
planet.
think there's more. If you could pay money for wars, you could pay more.
I'm not saying that there's not more money. What I'm saying is we have flooded a lot more money into like the most under-resourced kids, and it has not been translating into the type of results that it should be. But continue. I'm sorry.
Well, because in addition to the money that they need, I'm fine with the facts, but it's training and it's money. It's money and it's training. You don't just throw money at shit. You have to provide training. Nothing's gonna get better just because you got money at shit. But people have been making money and walking away and leaving our kids in dire straits, and nothing's better because of it. Our teachers need more money. They deserve more money when they are effective and doing their very best.
There you go. I like that last part. I
only believe that. I only believe that. There's only one way, right?
But you can't differentiate between teachers. It's illegal in many places.
When Jubilee Ransom is talking about teachers, she only talking about one kind, and that's an effective teacher.
I got you.
Or you know what I'm saying? Because what else are we doing? Because you got one job, okay? A child comes in, and when I'm talking about children that are held back, let's just say that they came in far behind grade level, far below grade level. All right, that's one thing. But what about children who come in on grade level? You have one job, bro. Like, teach the child. They came in on grade level. They came reading, and then at the end of the year, they're not okay. They can't pass the test. They can't show mastery. Why? That's a reflection of your poor instruction, and nobody could tell me otherwise, right? And I'm talking about a child that comes to school every day. If it's uniform, they wear uniform. I'm talking about that kid. There's plenty of those kids who are not able to be proficient on these exams at the end of the year because they sat in a class for a year with an ineffective teacher, right? And so the last thing I'll say is teacher accountability, right? I think we need to keep a pulse on teacher accountability. I've seen these shifts happen in other states, and it's changed the game because it stopped the misalignment between teachers and the product that they're supposed to have, or the outcome, which is student mastery. Like, we don't do it in any other way. You go to a doctor, like I said earlier, and you say, "Hey, I have an issue with my heart," and they chop off your toe. You will immediately say, what kind of doctor are you? I'm never coming back. But in teaching, it's okay for there to be a separation between student proficiency and student mastery and teacher effectiveness, and that pisses me off 1,000% of the time. That's my final.
I agree. I wish we had more time. I absolutely agree.
You annihilated your final thoughts. That was amazing. Yeah.
I love it. I thought, and I agree with that. I think, and I know we're closing. I would just say, I think what you said, David, like, I would have been an amazing student if there was like, if you told me, okay, what does it take to be a 9th grader, a 10th grader, 11th grader? I probably would have finished school like 2 years early. And like, I think that you can have all these kids, hey, socially promote, y'all in the same homeroom, y'all in the same advisory, but in these classes, you got your own individualized journey. And there's a lot of schools doing passport-esque type of school experiences. But anyway, we leaving you wanting more. Jubilee did an incredible job leading us today. That was Jubilee. That was David. That's Omar. He will return safely from captivity. He looks great spirits. We love you, Omar. Get back to the States safely. I am Charles, and we will see you all. We are definitely on our own. We will see you all same bad time, same bad station next week. I will say we ran out of space on the on South Star, so I can't rebroadcast this episode Friday. I have to figure out a way to rebroadcast this show Friday.
We got a special show coming up next week too.
So you don't want to miss it.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about.
You got that cat from Jones Barbecue and Foot Massage. So you got
school board recall.
Oh. That's a totally different person from the Jones Barbecue and Foot Massage people.
Totally
so David will be leading us next week. You don't want to miss it. Again, for the whole group. I'm Charles. Y'all have a great one. Peace out.
Later, y'all.